Delighted today to invite Deane and Chuck Keeling to the podium from Shorelines Casino Thousand Islands and Great Canadian Entertainment. Please give them a warm summit welcome. Perhaps we all will be a little luckier after this.
Thank you, everybody. Happy to be here. I'm Deane. I'm the general manager at Shorelines Casino Thousand Islands. I took over the property in 2018, so I've been there a few years now, and I was there through the fateful pandemic that affected, I'm pretty sure, everybody in the region, so not just us. I do want to take a minute just before I get started. I'm going to take a second to steal a story from a CEO that I worked for about 20 years ago now. And it's stayed with me and lasted with me for a very long time, and it has varying messages that come through in it. It's different for everybody, and everybody picks up a little bit differently on it, but I'm just going to steal a couple seconds and just walk you through his story. So the story is about a big game hunter. He's a successful hunter, and he's at the point in his career where he's decided that he's going after the big game. He wants his goal. He wants his lion. So he books himself on a safari. And yes, I realize in this day and age that is not acceptable to be a big game hunter. He gets himself booked on a safari, and he's on the safari, and he's anticipating every day managing to get that lion he's looking for. One morning, while prepping to go out for the hunt, he hears some rustling in the bushes. Knowing where he is and being prepared, he grabs his rifle and he goes to investigate. As he approaches a set of bushes, just at that moment, the lion leaps out. Being prepared, he raises his rifle and he fires. When the smoke clears, he is more than elated to be alive. However, the lion is nowhere in sight. So, taking that aback, he goes back to camp, collects his thoughts, and decides that maybe he wasn't as ready as he thought he was, so he decides that he's going to do some target shooting. So he sets up some target shooting, and he's practicing firing off some rounds. While he's reloading, he hears again a rustle in the bushes. He's not going to miss this time. So he collects himself up, grabs his gun, and carefully starts investigating through the bushes. And as he approaches some tall grass and he parts the tall grass, to his surprise, he finds the lion, who is actively climbing onto a large rock and jumping off, practicing his leap. I'll come back to that a little bit later on, just because I want people to process what that story means to them. As I mentioned, I'm at Shorelines Casino Thousand Islands. Chuck is with our corporate group working out of BC, and he's here as our head of stakeholder relations. So he'll talk a little bit about some information after me, and I'm going to talk a little bit more locally. So Shorelines Casino Thousand Islands has about 250,000 visitors per year on average. Right now we're sitting at 482 slot machines, 14 table games. Some of those are electronic table games. And at our Windward dining room, we seat about 200 people. We can push 200 people. We have enough seats on average for about 186. And at current, we have 137 team members. To note of that 137 team members is that there are probably a good 80 to 90 people in that group that have been at the property since day one in 2002. So we had a lot of our staff come back after the pandemic and stuck it out during waiting for our call. We were happy to have them back, and we're happy to have them back every day that they're there. As it mentions on the slide, the average length is about 10 years, but that's because we have a lot of new employees that are softening that 20-year experience, including two of my department heads who have been there since day one as well. Thousand Islands Casino opened in 2002. It was originally part of a plan by the Ontario Casino Corporation. By the time the completion of Shorelines, well, I'm just going to call it Shorelines because that's what it is now. Shorelines Casino Thousand Islands was completed construction. The Ontario Casino Corporation and the Ontario Lottery Corporation had merged into the OLG, giving the OLG oversight of all gaming in Ontario. Coming around to about 2012, the OLG announced their privatization plans for all of the casinos in Ontario. And in January 2016, Great Canadian Gaming took over Shorelines Casino Thousand Islands along with Kawartha Downs. In 2020, obviously, this was the first time that we saw anything that shuttered our doors for a major period of time. That's not excluding that there was in Ontario in the early 2000s the Mohawk power grid blackout, which shut the doors for 7 to 10 days, depending on where you were in the province. But this was definitely the longest closure we had ever seen. Of course, 2021, we turned over Great Canadian Gaming to Apollo, and they have taken over as the management group for the casinos, working under the Great Canadian Entertainment banner. Since we've been in possession of the property, we have done a few upgrades to the property. We did do a $250,000 improvement to a VIP area, which for anybody who had been to the property prior to 2019 did not exist. Recently, we just went through a total upgrade on our surveillance system. It's the first upgrade the surveillance system has received since construction in 2002. So we've replaced over 20-year technology with brand new technology on our surveillance cameras for the property. This slide I want to talk a little bit about. And then this will circle back a little bit to the story I told earlier. A lot of people look at the pandemic as something that was the major impact to operations, particularly at Shorelines Casino Thousand Islands. The reality is that Shorelines Casino Thousand Islands enjoyed a great honeymoon period from 2002 to 2013 with limited competition. In 2013, a small Mohawk casino in New York went from being a few hundred slot machines to being a major resort casino and being a major marketing element in the entire region. I'm sure everybody's seen their commercials. They're on every 5 minutes. In 2018, as part of our commitment with the OLG and taking over the properties, Shorelines Casino Belleville was constructed, which, while it is a sister property to Shorelines Thousand Islands, is actually direct competition. It is the exact same distance away from Kingston, which is our core market for Thousand Islands, as Thousand Islands is from some people in Kingston. So we divided a little bit of our region, and at the same time, Belleville absorbed some of the region on the opposite side where Ajax Downs was the only competition for them. So more recently, we had the Bridgepoint Place Casino was being constructed and opened in 2018 over in the US. Rideau Carlton introduced their table games along with their slot machines and a plan for a major resort casino under the flag Hard Rock. And of course, in April, iGaming hit the scene. So that's just to say that Shorelines Casino Thousand Islands has definitely seen some other challenges besides the pandemic, and we continue on. Before I let Chuck take over, I'm just going to circle back to the story I told at the beginning. A lot of people would hear that story about the big game hunter and assume very simply that practice makes perfect. And it does. More so, the idea that even the best of us can miss. Definitely an answer. For me, and in particular in this day and age, between the after effects of the pandemic, the current economy, our history at Shorelines Casino Thousand Islands with new competition after new competition, it's a reminder that we need to be prepared for anything, that we need to be practicing our craft, and we need to be working our best to meet our goals. And don't get me wrong, obviously as a casino operator, profit is a goal, not gonna lie. But at the end of the day, we also have several other valuable goals with Great Canadian Entertainment that we start to focus on. Local employment, we have 137 employees at current. Support to our communities, along with our business partners at OLG. And lastly, direct support to local charities and organizations directly through Shorelines Casino Thousand Islands and our charitable work with our Great Canadians Proud group. So that is definitely where that story still ties into me some 20 years later. It's a good lesson in everything can change, everything can move, and so do you. And I'll turn it over to Chuck. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I too had no idea where he is going with that story, but I get it. He didn't tell me that in advance, so I'm sitting there thinking, where on earth are you going with this? But I get it, I get it. As Dale said, so my name's Chuck Keeling. I'm with Great Canadian Entertainment, which is the parent company of Shorelines. We'll just call it that, to your point, Dale. Dale mentioned I'm from BC. I am proudly Ontario born and bred. I just happen to, thank you. I was born in London, but grew up in Orangeville, and all my relatives live in Owen Sound. So when Dale asked that I come help with this presentation, I said, absolutely. I'm assuming it's in Gan. And he said, no, it's in Kemptville. I had to look it up and realize, oh, that's a long drive from Toronto. But stayed in Kemptville Suites last night. And the character of this town reminds me a lot of Orangeville from way back in the day. So I say this sincerely, thrilled to be here, and certainly to Anne and her team, appreciate the invitation to come tell you a little bit about Shorelines, which Dale has already done, but I do want to tell you a little bit more from the community support perspective. So Great Canadian Entertainment, we actually operate 25 properties in 4 different provinces. We are Toronto-based. Our largest footprint is in Toronto. We have 12 properties here, including Shorelines, but we operate all the way down to Brantford and everything in between through the GTA, and there is some relevance to that I will get to in a moment. But one of the things I would say, very transparently, if gambling is going to exist in a community, in society, in a jurisdiction, not everyone is in support of that. We totally get that. We totally respect that. But what I will say is that a model like that exists here in Ontario is a pretty good one relative to pretty well any other jurisdiction in North America. And what I mean by that, so as Dale mentioned, our operational contracts are with OLG, obviously a crown of the province. We operate with a certain percentage of revenue. The majority of the revenue, however, is retained by OLG for the benefit of the provincial treasury to support healthcare, education, social services, First Nations, infrastructure, services that everyone uses every day. So the ultimate beneficiary of gambling revenue is the province, Ontario communities, as it should be. As Dale said, we are a for-profit company, but we operate on what might surprise people, tighter margins than what you think, because the majority of the revenue is retained by OLG. One of the other beneficiaries, if there is a casino in an Ontario community, is that community itself. So with the township of Leeds and TI and with the town of Gananoque, they receive 50-50 share of these host municipality payments that are a function of what is generated at Shorelines Casino Thousand Islands. And so province-wide, there was $80 million that was retained by our 12 host communities. And across Canada, it was about 118. A similar program exists in British Columbia. You can see the fountain at Confederation Park here. Kudos to both the township and the town in terms of how they have invested those funds that have equated to date since the property opened to the tune of about $64 million. Again, split 50-50 between GAN and Leeds and TI that way. And here's just a list of some of the infrastructure that it's been able to support. And so infrastructure that is used by the citizens, so very visible, very tangible. So again, that is one of the benefits. If gambling is going to exist in a community, how it is reinvested that way. This is not a promotional plug. This is going to come back to how our span across Ontario and across the GTA, we believe is going to help Shorelines Casino Thousand Islands longer term. About a year ago, we introduced a player loyalty club that we call Great Canadian Rewards. It's fairly straightforward. We're all familiar with what loyalty programs look like, but preceding the introduction of this program, it was all segmented by region. This program now exists and a player can use at any of our 12 properties in Ontario. More specifically, more importantly, we just opened the first phase of a $1 billion casino resort in Toronto at Woodbine Racetrack. We just, less recently, about a year ago, opened Pickering Casino Resort, which is a $500 million development. These have, there's a 5,000 person theater that's going to open New Year's Eve. at the Toronto Resort, a 2,500 person venue at Pickering, restaurants, hotels. We can obviously look at those various synergies, and for those players that frequent our Toronto location, if they happen to be driving up the highway, they will be familiar with our player program, Great Canadian Rewards, and that Shorelines is part of that family and some of the incentives and rewards that they could use at Shorelines. Or conversely, if they're a player here and they want to have a free stay in Toronto or Pickering or take in a show, that type of thing. We are going to be able to build off of that type of synergy, which we do believe longer term, as we further cement that brand, and this program is going to have direct benefit to help Dale and his team with some of the competition that they are feeling each and every day. The final thing that I do want to say, I've talked about some of the benefits related to gambling. There's a downside to gambling. There's a dark side to gambling, and that is for those that can't responsibly play. And to that I would say, I'm not going to walk you through or belabor any of the details, but Dale and his team, all of our teams, are equipped to deal with those instances, those inevitable instances when they come across a player that is demonstrating what we call red flag behavior. There are obvious signs of distress. They are complaining or upset because of how much they've spent. They've been coming to the casino more and more. They're spending more and more, that type of behavior. And to be able to intercept and have a discussion and have a very challenging conversation if they are having a problem. And there are actually independent advisors at sites like Shorelines Casino Thousand Islands that are trained and equipped to actually help course correct that individual, which could include them actually barring themselves from coming to Ontario casinos. There are a series of programs and policies and training that we must adhere to ensure for that 2 or 3% of the general population that is at risk or demonstrating signs of problem gambling can actually get the help they need, which could again include just not coming to casinos anymore. And this is all the more prevalent and all the more important now that there is a proliferation of iGaming as well, and that convergence from those playing in land-based facilities like ours, those playing in the online environment, and how all of that interrelates. There's a lot of gambling out there, as we know, so these kind of programs are all the more important to us now. And Dale, I think that is it, isn't it? Yes. So we're happy to take questions. Again, we appreciate your time today.